We will always be in love. You will always be Mrs. West, all over the world. That is important to me, and to you. I'm Acadia Einstein, and this is Strangeful Things.
Sheltering in place is not advised, as your survival cannot be ensured in that scenario.
Love has practically caused me to just get you destroyed.
Unsolved, unresolved, it's super complicated.
Strangeful Things.
Welcome, my lovelies, to a very special international episode of Strangeful Things. I've given the Grackles the night off, and I'm here with the wonderfully talented Emma from the podcast Fan Critical. How goes it, Emma?
I am so excited to be doing this. We have been talking about this for like 18 months.
Pretty much.
And I'm delighted to be a special guest for a change and doing something that is a passion of mine in a slightly less creepy way than that actually sounds. And on a different platform. So, you know, very much outside of my usual podcasting themes, shall we say.
I'm excited. I really am. Now, we have a bit of a tradition with Shuey and Mel's where at the beginning of every episode we share something new and good. But it's sort of evolved and it's become new or good.
Ooh.
And sometimes just new, and a lot of the times it's just something shitty, because apparently the pandemic has tightened up the serotonin supply worldwide. But England is not America, and since you are the second stupidest English-speaking country on the planet, that's good. So you tell me what's new and good with you.
Ooh, well, I mean, let's face it, 2020 has been a bit of a shitbag, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But there have been new and good things. What is new and good here? What's new and good for me is that it's my dad's 60th birthday next week.
Oh.
And for the first time in over a decade, I am living 5 minutes around the corner from him, so I can pop round, give him cake, and see him on his birthday.
That is outstanding.
That is new and good.
That is a really, really nice thing.
Yeah. I can't touch him or go in the house.
No,
but I can see him.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the swings and roundabouts, guys.
Yep. For me, new and good this week, I think it'll have to be, and I've used this a few times, but things with the job are going well. You know, the money job that keeps the wheels turning and everything like that. So I'm just going to knock on wood and keep that train rolling down the tracks.
I think that is perfectly acceptable to be repeating something as new and as good as that.
Yeah, especially if I technically, you know, since I was unemployed for so long, I can milk this for like another year.
100%, yeah. You can milk this for as long as you are unemployed.
Oh, well then.
Plus 10%.
Well, then we are in for a long road. Now, I guess, since you might suck and people will turn the show off halfway through, you should tell everybody about Fan Critical now.
Yeah.
Because people want to know.
Well, yeah, and if I tell you now, you might go and listen to it before you listen to how shit I actually am on the podcast. But the good news about Fan Critical is that it's not just me on that podcast. There are 5 of us. We are a fellowship of fandom. We talk about all things movies and TV, or film and TV, however you prefer to say it. You guys are more movies. We're kind of films.
Mm-hmm.
You know, got the Brit on the podcast. So we have a very eclectic mix of personalities and interests, and we cover everything from Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, Westworld. We also have a really great mini-series called The Worst of Netflix, where 2 of my Fan Critical colleagues, John and Gareth, trawl through the depths of Netflix to find what we would classify as a zero blueberry film. Basically, the worst of the worst. They are hilarious. Obviously, there is a bit of a drought in terms of new content at the moment.
Sure.
So we have been doing a new podcast. You might want to bleep me here, called How the Fuck Have You Not Seen That? Where we dive into our closets of shame to talk about the films that we've pretended to see because they're classics, but actually have never watched them before. For example, I only first watched Gladiator about 3 months ago.
Come on.
It's very shameful, yeah. But we discovered this week that Gareth, over in Australia on the Fan Critical podcast, has never seen Finding Nemo.
Wow. Okay.
And that's shameful. Totally shameful.
You know what? Then he's going to have to move over, because the only Disney movie I have ever seen is Snow White when I was a little kid.
Dude.
Mm-hmm.
We have got to sort that out. That is terrible. Well, if you want to listen to some of that bollocks and a load of British people chatting about film and TV, then you can find us on whatever podcasting platform that you like. Just search for Fan Critical. It is what it says on the tin. We're fans, we're critical, we talk about TV and film. And that is my promo bit over.
Nice. And it really is a marvelous show. And it's through Fan Critical and our mutual love of the Castle Rock show that we even met. So I am, and I'm just happy about the whole thing. So, and I'm really glad you're here. Now,
I'm really excited.
I know, right? Since we've covered all the bases promotion-wise, we can get into the topic at hand, and we're covering these monsters because when you and I were chatting about what British horror we could talk about, you said that Fred and Rose West was the case that got you hooked on true crime. So tell me a little bit about that.
You know, when you hear someone else saying that, it makes me sound like a complete psychopath. I've checked. I don't tick all the boxes, so luckily we're okay. There's something about Fred and Rose West that really struck me when I was like an early teen, as these people are so normal and just like round the corner. And it was a big thing about the whole House of Horrors and when they tore it down, and spoiler warning if you don't know anything about the Wests, they were awful people.
Yes.
But also they were kind of just normal working class people that did some really hideous things, and I think for me it was almost the kind of banality of their kind of surface life, and then the horror underneath it, literally. And it was around that time I think I kind of gotten into Jack the Ripper a little bit, but that wasn't quite so kind of upfront,
right,
or modern, I suppose. And then it was kind of Fred and Rose West, and Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were another one of our homegrown killing duos. And I think every time I read or I listen to something or I watch something about Fred and Rose West, something else crops up that surprises me. And I think there's just something very British about them.
Yeah.
Also they're terrifying, and I used to have nightmares about them as a kid.
Makes me feel better.
Yeah, I'm not actually insane. I promise you. But for you, obviously, I know a lot about American serial killers because they're much more prevalent because it's a bigger place.
Sure.
There's more people. But how did you find out about the Wests?
It was a documentary on A&E, and they had interviews with some of the kids, and they just kept going back to the house on Cromwell Street, and it got drilled into my head basically, and then I kept thinking about it, and since the show didn't 100%, because it was a regular network show, it glossed over some of the details, so I started sniffing around it, and then I smelled something really bad. And it's one of those things where, like you said, they're so humdrum and so not at the same time. That
juxtaposition, or almost like antithesis, I think is fascinating. And I think it's the first time I realised that someone can look completely normal but be a complete dick.
Yes.
And, like Bundy is the perfect example. Charming, good-looking guy, really good, socially, and, no one would ever have imagined the horror that he wreaked. And I think they're a bit less charming,
Yes.
We'll get into the details. They're slightly less charming, but they were normal people, from the outside, and just the shock and the horror of how they got away with it for so long, and how nobody noticed or nobody did anything about these people, these women going missing. That for me is the horror of it. And I think I was fascinated to find out how they got away with that. How did they manage to hide this for so long? Without anybody really asking any questions.
And what in the universe would make people like that lucky? And yet somehow they were.
Right? That is some seriously fucked up karma.
Right?
Yeah, that's not right. It's not right at all.
So we'll get into the case a little bit. You just interrupt me when you want to correct me or do something British. I hope I need a part where an old British crone has to speak, because I'm very certain that you would slay that voice. So fingers crossed.
Oh, yeah.
And also fingers crossed that the ghosts of Fred and Rose West don't rise from their graves and show up in your house and fuck you to death in your bed. Not that they fucked people to death when they were alive. Well, they kind of did, but they did fuck people and then kill them. So
part of the process, right?
Yes. It's sort of a logical progression.
Well, here's an interruption already. I'm terrified of ghosts, so now I'm never going to sleep again, and I really regret doing this podcast.
So, you're scared of ghosts. My wife is scared of becoming a ghost. That's her fear.
Ooh.
She's like, I don't want to be a ghost. I don't want to be stuck. And I'm like, I can't help you. Like, I don't know what other than...
I don't control the ghost world. Like,
exactly.
I'm so sorry, my love. But
I'm not handing out the membership cards.
It happens.
Oh. So, and I'm going to point out now, for the listeners, like with any complex case, there's conflicting details. And if the version that I'm using does not match yours, then you can call me out on Twitter at Acadia or email strangefulthings@gmail.com. But I'm not going to feel shitty about it. You, on the other hand, can correct me all you want, Emma, and I promise to feel only slightly shitty about it because I tried really hard to make your intro case as thorough as possible. Now,
I will correct you if I feel you're wrong,
that's
but
fine with
I don't
me.
expect you to feel bad about it.
Good. By the numbers, Fred, and later Fred and Rose, killed no less than 12 young women between the years of 1967 and 1987 in and around their town of Gloucestershire. Now, have you ever been to Gloucestershire?
So firstly, it's Gloucestershire.
I figured. I had a 50-50 shot.
I mean, it's nice to think of it as a shire. It's not. And secondly, Gloucestershire is a county. Gloucester is the city. Gloucestershire, I have been to Gloucestershire. But I didn't know if I'd been to Gloucestershire, so I had to get on the Wikipedia. and go, now where are the places in Gloucestershire? Mm-hmm. And where might I have been? So there is a place in Gloucestershire called Tewkesbury.
Okay. That's a great name.
Tewkesbury has an abbey. It's very, very old. And it has the tallest Norman tower in the whole of England.
Well, all right.
Yeah, we do good, like, old religious buildings.
Yeah.
Also in Gloucestershire is Cheltenham, where they do the horse racing.
Wow. Look at that.
And the Cheltenham races, they do Cheltenham Ladies' Day. All the ladies wear big fancy hats. My cat's come to join us, so if you hear any weird noises, that's her. I've never been to Cheltenham races, but I have been to Tewkesbury Abbey.
Well, all right. We'll get you a big hat, and then you can absorb all the local colour.
Yeah. Something with flowers and feathers, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
A really large fascinator on my
If it's a
tiny
big
head.
hat contest, then I'm going to make sure that you win it.
Yeah.
Now, since you weren't born, as far as I know, for any of the time that they were active, you goddamn child, I am glad to know that you were safe from their clutches. Not that you seem the type that
Thank
would
the
be in a
Lord.
position to need to trust some sweaty horrors at any point in your young life.
Look, you never know.
Yeah, that's true.
I am also grateful that as I was born the end of the 80s, I don't know why I was looking at the dates then. I was like, I know my birthday. I know when I was born, that really I missed most of the chance to be caught by a serial killer.
Yes.
Here's a fun fact for you. So, I believe, but it's debated, that there is a serial killer in Manchester.
Really?
Called the Canal Killer. So, and a distinct rise in cases of people drowning in the Manchester canals, and they think there's a pusher. So my rule is don't go to Manchester, and if you do, don't go near the canals. So luckily, I don't seem to be under any risk of being caught by a serial killer now. So by the time they were kind of tried, I'd just been born. So later on, when I was talking about like when they pulled the house down on Cromwell Street, that happened when I was quite small.
Right.
But I kind of saw the aftermath of it.
Sure. Well, I'm also going to avoid Manchester and its canals.
Yeah, I would. You don't want to be drowning in them.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
So Fred West, officially Frederick Walter Stephen West, was born on September 29th, 1941 at Bickerton College, Muchmarcle, Herefordshire. And there's the first question I have regarding place names in Britain. Why do you insist on putting the county in there? Is there a danger that there might be a Bickerton College, Muchmarcle in a different county, so you need to differentiate?
Yeah, well, it's like, how many Springfields are there in America?
Yeah, but we have states. There's only one per state.
Yeah, well, you know, our counties are like your states. We're just smaller.
Are they? Are your counties like states?
Well, sort of. I mean, they don't have different, like...
governments and stuff.
Yeah, so they have local governments,
right.
But a county... So I live in Hampshire, and Hampshire covers, like, a bit of the southeast of England, places like Portsmouth, and Aldershot, which is an old army town, and Portsmouth is an old naval city. So even though we're a lot smaller, obviously, than America, we have counties, and in the counties, so you might have a Much Markle in, I don't know, Aberdeenshire.
Okay.
So yeah, they're like your states.
Knowing that it's like states makes a lot more sense. And because we have counties too, it's just that we never mention them because they're kind of incidental unless you're dealing with the sheriff or some taxes or some shit like that.
Yeah, because I suppose you do. You have county sheriffs, don't you? Which is within a state.
Yeah.
So kind of, so it's a bit like that. So our counties are more like your states, I would say. So they're like, there's one of the towns that I used to live in when I was younger was called Hazelmere with an S. And that's in Surrey. And there is also a Hazelmere with a Z somewhere up north.
You know what? We could turn the goddamn show off right now and I would just be running around lording this information over all us dumb Americans.
Did you know that the UK counties are just like American states?
Oh, that makes so much sense.
There you go. Every day's a school day, man.
Yep, that's right. Now, Fred was born into a family of poor farm workers and his parents, Walter and Daisy, were not what you would call winners.
They sound like cows.
Oh, they do. Oh.
Walter and Daisy the cows. Also, I did not realise that Fred West had he's got two middle names.
Yeah.
Frederick Walter Stephen West.
I think that's the pinnacle of his achievements, though, as far as...
His positive ones, yeah.
He grabbed that extra name and that was kind of it. His mom was overprotective, but the person she was most often protecting little Fred from was Walter, who was known to be pretty strict. And he was also a very pretty baby with blonde hair and blue eyes, like a lot of babies are, and that went south pretty quick.
Yeah.
When he was 5, they moved to Moorcourt Cottage, at a place called Moorcourt Farm, where Walter worked as a milking herdsman. And that just means he had to milk the cows.
Yeah.
Also, just because Moorcourt Cottage sounds super quaint, it doesn't mean it was nice. It had no electricity, so since there was nothing else to do, Walter spent his days milking cows and then would come home at night and milk Daisy because she had 8 kids by the time Fred was 10.
Dude.
I'm just saying.
Dude, did you actually just say that?
I'm just saying.
And also she's called Daisy.
Yeah,
it sounds like she's a cow. She's a cow.
You set it up perfectly.
Unbelievable. And I didn't know that was how. Do you know how, Britishly quaint this is?
Yes,
it's like the beginning of one of our pretend British stories where it's like, he was a milking herdsman, him and his 20 siblings, they had no electricity and were so poor. But actually, what is this? This is the 50s, right? So it's post-war, still in kind of ration times, there's a lot of hardship, and growing up in that part of the world and at that time was hard. Like, this is a rough life. You talk about Walter and his abuse, it's that cycle of abuse thing, isn't it?
100%.
If you don't escape that and you can't escape that, then you just continue that cycle. And clearly, Frederick Walter Stephen West. I remembered it. Great.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That was quite shocking for me. My brain at the moment is not retaining much.
Sort of feels like something from the 19th century, but I suppose things were pretty different back then, like you say. The more kids you had, the better off you were work-wise. And 2 of the 8 died, so I guess overall 6 is still a lot of goddamn kids, is what it is. Now, how many siblings do you have, if any? 0.
I'm an only child.
Oh.
Well, except for my mum and dad's cat, Dora, who came into my life 7.5 years ago and has since taken all of my glory from me.
Yeah, well.
Even to the point where sometimes my dad gets confused between the 2 of us, calls her Emma and me Dora. Even when I'm not there.
That is outstanding.
Yeah, it is. But that's quite standard, isn't it? In the 50s, my dad's one of 6 kids.
Yeah.
He was born in 1960. I think my oldest uncle was born in 48.
Yeah.
My granddad would have been 99 today.
Wow.
Same age as Prince Philip. Philip, feed the corgis. There you go. I knew you'd like that one.
I do.
That's my Liz.
Nice.
My Liz impression. Good old Liz. We're friends,
Oh.
And it's abject poverty, isn't it? And this is why when I said before, if they grew up in shitty environments, Walter was abusive. Are you surprised? He was probably traumatized from the war. He had no money. He's got 8 fucking kids.
Yep.
And he's married to a cow called Daisy. So, it's a really hard life.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And, these kids would be, as you say, the more kids you had, the better off you were work-wise, because you put them to work at 7, especially the boys. And that was how you survived, because it was all very much hand to mouth. And I think, it's not unsurprising that Fred turned out to be, not great.
Not top of his class. And
yeah, because
Yeah.
he probably didn't even go to school.
exactly. He
Like,
didn't.
what education are you going to get? Because he wouldn't have had that opportunity. And that's kind of, I mean, it's a shame, but
Yeah.
it happened to a lot of people. And, it's just kind of the way of the world then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you had money or an inheritance or...
Or a lordship.
Well, yes, that's true. A lordship.
Now, Fred was not a smart kid, but he was apparently handy with wood and fairly good at artwork. And above all else, he was regarded as a mama's boy, which I'm sure someone can do some fine psychoanalysis on. I'm not sure what being closer to your mom than your dad has to do with anything, especially when the mom was nice to him and the father was the one who doled out punishments. But it wasn't like Fred got beatings on the daily from Walter either. By all accounts, he had a pretty good relationship with him, but he was his mama's favorite, and that's not something that's easy to shake. He did, however, get some beatings at school, and not from the other kids. He would get lit up by the teachers for getting into trouble, and his mom would march down to the school and bitch them out, which is about the least cool thing that can happen to you when you're trying to act out to be kept from being called a mama's boy. Yeah,
man, I mean, that's just... Come on, Daisy.
That's
You're not helping him out here at all, are you?
So... He started out, like I said, as a blonde, blue-eyed little baby, and he ended up as a frizzy-haired, gap-toothed goofus by the time he hit puberty. Not that puberty is good to anyone, but you know what I mean. Everyone looks vaguely like they were cast in the Dark Crystal, and Fred was no exception. But turning into an awkward lummox was not the only problem facing the young monster in waiting. There was also sex. And now we get to the part of Fred's childhood that is in dispute, because when dealing with a serial killer, one has to take all the shit they say with a grain of salt, especially Fred West, who was a notorious liar. According to Fred, his father had sex with his sisters, Fred's sisters, Walter's daughters, all the time, using the rationale of, I made you, so I'm entitled to have you. Now that's gross, but I don't have a time frame for when Fred said this. If he was a kid, I'd be inclined to believe that he heard it from his father. But if it was when he was an adult, I wouldn't doubt for a second that he said it because he thought it himself. You know what I mean? Like the whole, I made you so I'm entitled to have you kind of grossness.
That is the most unbelievably weird and creepy thing to say.
Yeah.
It's almost like a god complex.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know how Fred West could have considered himself to be capable of creating someone. And I think I made you, so I'm entitled to have you.
I know.
Doesn't it make you think of Victor Frankenstein?
100%. 100%.
So I recently watched the stage adaptation of Frankenstein with Johnny Lee Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch. And it's a really interesting, it's one of my favourite books of all time. I love Frankenstein. I've read it and read it and read it. I studied it over and over at school, college, university. And I think one of the fascinating things about that is that idea of ownership. You can't own a person. If a person has autonomy, which any human being does to an extent, or should do, you cannot own them. And also, don't have sex with your children.
Yep.
I mean, that actually is the most important part of this. Don't have sex with your
Yeah, that's
children.
probably the lead.
Yeah, I mean, I figured that everyone listening to this and you is pretty clear on the fact that you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
It's just fucked up. But no wonder he turned out the way he did.
Yeah, for sure. Now, for what it's worth, one of Fred's brothers classified the incest allegations as hogwash, which seems legit because from what I gather, washing hogs was part of the father's job description.
Ba-doom.
Da-ding. And the other things that were maybe lies that Fred told were that he learned bestiality from his dad, meaning that washing the hogs counted as foreplay, and that he was introduced to sex in general by his mother when he was 12. So I'm not going to say that this is far-fetched, and I'm not going to say it's believable, but I am going to say that this sort of shit would cause a cycle of abuse that if it was like the mom saying she abused her own kid, you would find it easy to believe.
Sometimes I really wish that people could see my face on podcasts.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because, I just made a face throughout that entire thing that basically summed up my feelings towards this dysfunctional family.
Not great.
Grim.
Now, whatever did or didn't happen to he and his siblings as kids, Fred definitely dropped out of school at 15 to become a farm laborer, which is a rough occupation to have to deal with. At least milking herdsman is specialized to a degree. Laborer, which I was at one time, is just the guy that has to move a pile of rocks from where it is to where it's supposed to be.
It's the dog's body.
Yeah. And farms are fucking full of shitty jobs like that, so Fred was really sort of dead-ended with his choice of shoveling shit instead of finishing school.
Mind you, I'm actually surprised that he got as far as 15.
Yeah.
Like, I know
that is kind of true.
School was not like it is now, but that actually is quite impressive.
Yeah.
Hello there. Fan Critical is a podcast dedicated to TV and film. I'm Len.
Hi Len, I'm John. Join us and the rest of the Fan Critical team as we run through all of yours and our favourite shows.
Yep, we've covered all the greats, your Game of Thrones, HBO's Watchmen, even something that's not so great, The Walking Dead. And now we're about to begin our coverage of HBO's Lovecraft Country.
Could be good, could be shit, who knows. If you have ever wondered about shit films on Netflix, yeah, nice segue. We do cover them for our patented series, The Worst of Netflix. If you fancy having a laugh, come and join us on that.
And if you want to hear us get a little tipsy and talk about some of the shameful secrets and classic films that we've been lying about seeing for years, then you can check out our How the F*** Have You Not Seen That series. Some absolute classics in there like Gladiator, Reservoir Dogs and Spirited Away.
So if you do want to listen to us at Fan Critical, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts. We're on every place that you can find a podcast. All you need to do is search for Fan Critical.
Yeah, so do that. Do it right now. Stop what you're doing. Do it right now. Then go pour yourself a drink. Come have a laugh and listen to us. Yeah. Cheers, guys.
See ya.
When he was 16, he sort of turned into what is known in scientific circles as a horny jerk and was super aggressive with girls that he thought were attractive. Given how tough it was to be a woman in 2020, imagine how tough it must have been to have had to deal with goons like him grabbing at you all the time.
Do you know, I remember at school that people always used to say the boys that are mean to you, it's because they really like you. And as a grown woman, I've now realised that that's just fucking bullshit. Boys are shit. Like little kids. Teenagers are the worst. 16-year-old boys are terrible. I'd have punched him. He has a punchable face anyway, Fred. Mm-hmm. You know, his mum's Daisy the cow. So, you know. I'm going to keep going with this until it runs out of juice.
Well, no, you milk it. Now, there's one gal that gave as good as she got, as we'll learn later. But for now, the big thing that happened to Fred was that he wrecked his motorcycle when he was 17 and put himself in a coma for a week. Now, I know they say head trauma as a youth can be another indicator of murder trouble later in life, so just check that off on the old bingo card.
Have we got any bedwetting? Fire starting? Killing small animals?
The whole thing left him with a metal plate in his head and one leg that was shorter than the other. And for once in my life, I'm not going to make the so he could only walk in a circle joke because it would have been better had it been true, because it would be hard to catch and kill so many people if you could only go in a circle.
That is just excellent. Well done. Well done, my friend. Well done.
He hadn't killed anyone yet. He just did some other gross shit. And he also got a girlfriend. This ne'er-do-well gal named Catherine Bernadette Costello was a successful thief when she met young Fred, who was, according to the pictures I have seen, at his absolute peak of handsomeness at this time.
Yeah, I mean, that peak wasn't much.
Yeah, it's graded on a scale. Now, he and 16-year-old Rena, as she was known, ran around together, had some sex, and stole some shit until Rena had to go back to Scotland. Summer love between petty criminals. It really warms the heart, doesn't it?
Really warms the cockles, my friend.
Exactly. And here's where things for Fred's noggin take another nasty turn. He was out on the fire escape of a local youth club, probably smoking cigarettes. Though back then you could smoke anywhere, so who knows what they were doing. But whatever it was, Fred stuck his hand up a gal's skirt and she punched him right in the face and knocked him off the fire escape to the ground below.
Yeah! If I could applaud, I'd applaud.
Mm-hmm. He got knocked out again, and I guess the part of his brain that made him not be a terrible murderer died when he hit the ground, because not that he was too great to start with, but he was never right again.
And do you know what? That is the perfect sum of it. He just wasn't right. I mean, there is just something wrong about that man. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's bad enough that he was just a jerky teenage boy anyway, because, I mean, they're shit. Not to mention being a weird mama's boy. Nothing wrong with being a mama's boy, but clearly that family was not functioning correctly.
Right.
And that didn't help. And it's almost like, and I do not have any sympathy for Fred West whatsoever.
No.
But it's almost like every turn, something just happened to fuck him up further. And to be fair, though, that girl that punched him in the face and knocked him off the fire escape, I would like to shake her hand and buy her a drink.
Damn straight.
If it wasn't for the fact that he then went on to kill a load of people, but it wasn't her fault, you know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if someone behaves like that with you, you punch him in the face. Good girl.
Especially if you're on a rickety fire escape. I assume it was rickety.
Yeah, of course it was.
So in 1961, Fred stole some shit with a buddy, and because he was a cement head, he got caught. And a little while after that, he got a 13-year-old girl pregnant. Now, the family knew the girl and were confused by Fred's defense, which was essentially to not understand why anyone was mad. He just figured that everybody did that.
13.
Yes, she was 13.
It's just fucked.
Yeah. And everyone doesn't do it. Fred. And the family kicked Fred out of the house when he was 20. He didn't go to jail for statutory rape because his doctor told the court that he was subject to fits.
Sorry, is that like, I'm sorry, I fell over and my penis entered you?
Pretty much. Yep.
Ooh, it's like in Austin Powers. Oops, I fell over.
Exactly.
Rape is not funny in any situation, but also...
This is the show.
How is being subject to fits an acceptable excuse for raping a child?
Hey, you're going to have to ask the court because they bought it and Fred was free. He got work at a construction site and soon started stealing from said construction site and having sex with more young girls. Fucking ugh. Now, his parents let him back into the house and his girlfriend Rena moved back to town. Rena had spent the time away becoming a better thief and also became a sex worker.
Thank God.
She was also pregnant by way of, according to the research, a, quote, Asian bus driver. And that will become important in a minute. They eloped and went back to Scotland. She had the baby, but because his parents would never accept that, Fred made her write his parents, telling them that, quote, their baby had died in childbirth, so they filled the gap by adopting a baby that looked like an Asian bus driver real quick.
I mean, this is about as legit as, I'm sorry I raped them, I have fits.
Exactly.
I mean, understandable. It was an era where that would be an issue. I get that. That's fine. I mean, but also, what a dick.
I know. It's awful. So, I guess it was either because he didn't want the parents to know that the baby wasn't his or the parents were super racist. Either way, that was the story they went with. And the story just goes on forever. I have a ton more to do, and he hasn't even met Rose yet. So, we're going to go at our own pace and we'll see what happens. But I'm going to use bullet points for this next chunk of time because fuck. There's a lot of facts.
I'm a fan of a bullet. And also, I'm terrible for just waffling. So give me a short bit. Shut me up.
Rena did not like having to blow Fred or give him anal or whatever fucked up thing he wanted whenever he wanted it, which was all the time. Because apparently Fred was a free use kind of guy, which is pretty gross.
Yeah.
And in a stunning turn of events, the pervert got a job driving an ice cream truck. It was called Mr. Whippy, which is a fucking great name for an ice cream truck, I gotta say.
Do you not have Mr. Whippy in America?
No.
Mr. Whippy is the best. So Mr. Whippy is like, it's a 99, so it's like, you know the cream ice cream that comes out of a funnel?
The soft serve?
Yeah, it's soft serve. But the ice cream vans were always Mr. Whippy, and it was like, get a 99 with a flake. And they used to be 99p. They're like probably $5.99 now, and I'm sure that they do DBS checks before they let people drive ice cream trucks. But I didn't know that he drove an ice cream truck. That's grim.
And well, he also used it as a method to seduce and rape the young teen girls who patronized said Mr. Whippy truck. And somewhere in the middle of there, Rena had Fred's first child. Aww. Now, he and Rena met a girl named Anna McFall, and Rena went back to Scotland fairly frequently, and they went back to Gloucester, and she came back with this Anna McFall, and they all lived together, and Fred got a job in a slaughterhouse. And the slaughterhouse taught him things.
If we're playing serial killer bingo...
Yeah.
I've already won the jackpot with Fred West, and we've not even met Rose yet. And that is when I almost think that up until this point, it's terrible, right? Let's be honest. There's been rape, there's been abuse, there's been, Daisy the cow. It's been a really traumatic time. It's almost like when Rose enters the picture, it is dialed up to 11, and then someone's given it speed. Yeah. That's a great way to put it, because she was the gas on the fire for sure. Yeah, 100%. For sure. Now, Rena, strangely enough, got tired of being relentlessly porked by Fred. Shock. And went back to Glasgow alone. But she missed her kids and she came back, and when she did, big surprise, he found Fred living with Anna McFall in a shitty trailer. I don't know what she thought was going to happen, but Anna McFall liked being relentlessly porked. Yeah. So that was kind of and she was super infatuated with Fred. So Rena went to the cops and told him that Fred was a pervert, and apparently Fred fit the description of the assailant in 8 sexual assaults that had happened recently in the area, but they didn't find that out until years later. And also, the fits. Yeah, well, you never know when you're going to have a fit. But also, I think, contextually, what I think is important to remember, it's not right and it's not okay, is that in this time, that wasn't taken seriously. Or not like it is now. Like, a 13-year-old girl, it is awful, but a 13-year-old girl in the 60s was a different kettle of fish. 100%. Yep. Women were expected to grow up quicker, and you were married at 16, 17, 18, 20, like early, young. And I don't think that, and this is going to sound awful, but I don't think that in the 60s or even the 70s, police took rape seriously. No, they didn't. At all. I mean, at all. Yeah, and I think, actually that is how someone like Fred West was allowed to grow and develop into the monster that he became. Not that he wasn't already a monster at this point, but worse. I mean, it's worse. Yes. We've not even hit the bad parts yet, really. Yeah, no. We're still ramping up. Now, Fred got Anna McFall pregnant, and she wanted him to divorce Rena and marry her. She was apparently cool with Fred overall, but Fred had an alternate plan. See, he decided that he wanted to stay with Rena, but Anna McFall was a problem, so he killed her, dismembered her, and buried her and the fetus, and cut off her fingers and toes. Now, that might be more significant than a bullet point delivers, but that was his... That's the irrational move, isn't it? You think, at this point, leave a post-it on the fridge or something. I don't think that any normal person automatically goes, do you know what? I'm really not into this relationship. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kill her, cut her into pieces, including her unborn child, my unborn child. Yep. And then cut off her fingers and toes, keep them, eat them, put them in a stew. That's not the logical response, is it? No. It's not the kind of thing that when you make out your little pros and cons chart, I don't think any of them would point to that being the solution. Especially since really, I guess, he did it to avoid Rena complaining to him. Basically, he just killed someone to stop his wife nagging. Yes. Nuts. It's wild that you said it that way, because that will not be the only time that happens. Nuh-uh. Now, Rena moved into the trailer after Anna was gone, because apparently everything was okay again, and Fred started molesting Charmaine, the bus driver's kid. So, now we're gonna fast forward to 1968, when he met Rose Letts, who would eventually become Rose West. And he might have killed another girl during that time, but nobody could prove it. So I'm not going to include it in the batch, as it were. Yeah, we deal with facts here. And now we get to Rose. She was born November 29th, 1953 in Devon, England. And yes, I'm going to ask you if you've been to all the places named in this episode, so get used to it. So have you ever been to Devon? Yeah, a lot. I love Devon. So we used to go there a lot when I was a kid for holidays. So have you ever had a cream tea, Acadia? No. Like scones with cream and jam? No. Well, you are missing out. You should try making scones. They're really easy. So they're lovely little, like, cakey spongy, dense things, and you cut them
Right.
in half, and you put cream and jam on them.
Okay.
But there is a big debate in the UK about what is the correct way to put cream and jam on a scone.
Oh.
So there's the Devon way, and then there's the Cornish way, so the way they do it in Cornwall. So a Devon cream tea is cream, then jam. In Cornwall, it's jam, then cream. And it is very important the way that you put your cream and jam on a scone. So I'd be
guess
interested
so.
to know if Rose, did it the traditional Devonshire way or not. Devon is beautiful, though. It's a stunning county, like really beautiful places, down in the southwest. Really gorgeous. And if you ever come, next time you come over here, we'll go.
Well, all right then. Do you know the difference between jam and jelly? I mean, obviously they're different, but you know how they're made?
Well, so when you make jam, it's just sugar and fruit and water, isn't it?
Right. And jelly is just the fruit juice.
Ah, so that's why it's not got bits.
Mm-hmm.
See.
People are learning a shit ton of
much.
things in this episode, So, when I was chatting with you about the episode on WhatsApp, you said something that really hit for me. You said you'd feel sorry for Rose if she wasn't so awful. And we're going to go into why, but did you want to elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, do you know what? So the thing about Rose is that she clearly was what she would have been described in that time as simple. She clearly had some learning disabilities. She clearly had some mental health issues, and she was taken in by Fred, manipulated, and I think it was the first time that she'd ever really been shown attention, and whatever that version of love is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really sad because he used her, and she was so desperate for his affection and his love and his kind of dedication to her that she did so many things that I think if she'd met someone that treated her right, she probably wouldn't have done.
Yeah, you're probably right.
For want of calling her slow, she was an easy person to manipulate because she wasn't,
She wasn't complex.
No, and that's a very kind way to say it.
Yes.
she wasn't bright, and she had a shitty life.
Yeah, we're going to get into it too.
Yeah, I don't think at heart she was originally a bad person.
No.
I mean, she made some terrible choices.
Yes, she did. And we're going to examine how she was formed and expose some horror in the whole thing. Now, her father was a schizophrenic who beat his wife and kids frequently and mercilessly. He went from shitty job to shitty job, so they never had any money, and her home life was generally terrible. Now, I have a quote here from Rose's brother, but I'm going to have you read it because I finally have someone with a real British accent, so we don't have to do our terrible ones.
Yours isn't that terrible, but here we go. If he felt we were in bed too late, he would throw a bucket of cold water over us. He would order us to dig the garden, and that meant the whole garden. Then he would inspect it like an army officer, and if he was not satisfied, we would have to do it all over again. We were not allowed to speak and play like normal children. If we were noisy, he would go for us with a belt or a chunk of wood. He would beat you black and blue until Mum got in between us. Then she would get a good hiding.
That's great. A chunk of fucking wood.
I mean, like what?
I'm not sure why that sticks in my head. I just picture the old fucker wandering around the house with a log, smashing people as he goes.
Yeah, like a log for the fire or something. He's like, I took my belt off earlier because I was too bloated from dinner. Look, here's a chunk of wood. That'll do.
Yeah.
What? Oh, I mean, also awful. That's a horrific childhood, isn't it? Like, living in fear constantly. And you go back to that whole thing about Rose is that clearly she found in Fred a more attentive version of her father.
Yeah.
And schizophrenia is not something to joke about. That is a rough.
Oh,
rough
for sure.
life
And I'm
to
sure
live.
that he was very poorly treated.
Helped or not helped, I think is the
not helped
thing.
at all, yeah.
Yeah. And it just, it's just sad, isn't it? It's just really sad.
And as a sign of the times, I guess when he wasn't beating his wife, he was putting babies in her, as she had 3 already by the time she got pregnant with Rose. And her depression at being a prisoner and a punching bag led her to get electroshock therapy when she was carrying the baby. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I know that the baby is floating around in what is scientifically known as mom water.
Yep, that is the term.
Yes, it reacts badly to electricity.
Yeah. I mean, also, electroshock therapy isn't great. When they were using it in the, what are we talking, 50s?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was the time where it's like, oh, so you've got the baby blues. Let's give you a lobotomy.
Yeah.
You know, and again, this comes back to the treatment of women in that time. There was no consideration whatsoever, and there is no doubt in my mind that had an impact on Rose.
Yeah.
And also, her poor mother.
Mm-hmm. Brutal. Now, there was no direct causation found, but Rose did have a weird habit of rocking her head back and forth. She did it when she was a baby and when she was a toddler, and it was so bad that her siblings complained that she was making noise bonking her dome off the side of the crib.
Whoa.
I can't prove it, but I assume that their complaining made the father come in with the discipline log and tune him up, so he would have been doubly mad at little Rose.
Oh, sorry, it's not funny. The discipline log.
It continued as she grew older, and she sort of seemed to be able to hypnotize herself by swinging her head. They called her Dozy Rosie, and as she became a teenager, she got teased a lot because, big surprise, she wasn't super smart. But she was super sexual. She would walk around the house naked after she took a bath, and in a hint of things to come, sexually abused her younger brother. Shocking nobody, the father would not let her date anyone her own age, but that didn't stop her from having sex with older dudes in her village.
Dude, like...
I know.
Oh, it's just... This is what I mean, though, is how... If she hadn't have made the choices she later made, how can you not feel sorry for Dozy Rosie?
Mm-hmm. Dozy Rosie. It's right in the name. Now, in 1968... a gal went missing in Gloucester. Mary Bastholm disappeared from a bus stop, and some think that she was a victim of Fred. That's the one they couldn't pin on him that I mentioned earlier. This matters because, as far as I can tell, Rose was in Gloucester at that time. See, the mother got sick of getting the shit beat out of her and took 15-year-old Rose to live with her daughter, Glennis. There, Rose worked at the family's snack bar and used her, hey, I'm a young girl and will fuck you charm to entice gross old perverts to have sex with her. Honestly, Emma, this whole story is an indictment of English society.
Dude,
and it's
come
terrible.
on. Do you know, I mean, it is terrible. And do you know what? So one of my favourite podcasts is My Favourite Murder. And one of the disclaimers that they always give is that, you know, we don't find murder funny. Mm-hmm. But it is the way that we deal with the horrible things is by making jokes. And I realise that I have basically just made jokes about Fred and Rose West the whole way through this so far. Because that is also how I deal with it.
Yep, that's what this show is.
Because, yeah, I mean, it's kind of if you didn't laugh, you'd cry, right?
Yep.
It's hideous. And it's just, I mean, for fuck's sake, Rose.
Yeah.
What is going through your head here? And I can tell you exactly from a psychological perspective, the only way that she knows to get attention and love, in inverted commas, is through her sexuality, because she doesn't have anything else going for her. She's lived in an abusive home. Her mother has clearly tried to get her out of that. Her father was a dick, also mentally unwell. So not necessarily his fault, but it also sounds like alongside the mental illness and schizophrenia, he was also an arsehole. So that just compounds everything. And there's a part of you that goes, you know what, I get it. I get that you use the only thing you have, the only skill and the only talent you have to get the attention and the affection that you need. Mm-hmm. But it's just tragic, man. It's just so tragic.
It really is. It's
and we're not all like that here. Some of us aren't like Daisy Rosie. Some of us are like Jane Austen characters instead.
This is not the prettiest picture of the UK that could be painted. Because there's nobody in it that's a good guy.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we're talking about Gloucestershire. I told you I live in Hampshire, which is Jane Austen County. So we're all lovely young ladies here.
So it's clearly the superior sheer.
It is, yeah.
Now, Rose, who had actually managed to get her way or weasel it or manipulate it somehow, she got into her father's good graces, sort of his favorite, so got beat the least, and she went back to live with him. Now, some sources claim it was because they had a sexual relationship, but others say that is just a rumor. Now, I'm going to say that if anything did happen, It was not in any way a fucking relationship because Dozy Rosie was not in a position to decide she wanted to have sex with her father, who kicked her and her siblings all over the fucking house.
Yeah, I mean, there is no informed consent here.
No. So there we are. The year was 1969, and 15-year-old Rose Letts was mean and stupid and had nothing to do and no prospects. The only thing she had developed an affinity for was having sex with older blokes. See how British I can be?
You nailed it.
Yeah. And as Emma said, the story is sad. But it was about to get sadder still because it was then that she met Fred West.
What do you think would have happened to Rose if she hadn't have met Fred West?
She would have ended up with an abusive husband. Not to the level of Fred, but like draws to like. The only attention she knew was sex and violence.
Yeah.
People go for what they know.
I wish she'd just met a slightly less shitty person, you know.
Yes.
It'd have been better for everyone all round, I think.
It really would have. And now that I think about it, since we got through the parallel stories of Fred and Rose, I think it probably makes sense for us to wrap up this episode and then we will have part 2 next week. What do you think of that?
I think that's a great idea.
All right. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Make sure you come back next week because Emma and I are going to do part 2. And make sure you look up Fan Critical because if you think she's delightful here, you just wait till she gets with her mates over there. It is something to behold. So, I guess tell everyone bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.